the last bit of today is something that I like to call next steps. So this is where we are now. Where are we going moving forward? Where are we thinking about this? The first one is what's called a word cloud. So if I start to look at some of the things that are up there, optimistic, excellent, happy, positive, less nervous, thought-provoking, curious, unsure. Okay, that's a good start. Better informed, intrigued. Look at all these posh words that everybody's used that they're spelt correctly. You can tell us. I've not done it. My spelling is atrocious. Can't spell that either. Engaged, lots of opportunities. That's good. So I think in general we seem to be having a positive or a slightly more positive. I know that we haven't ruled everything out completely, but that's a really good thing, and that's a really positive thing. So thank you for everybody for putting that on. So the next one is there anything else that you need to know? Anything else that you need to know? This one you can write what you want. This one's going to bring up a little section, so there isn't there might be a character limit, but it's certainly not a lot. So I'm going to start going through some of these. So the timeline, I think that's really important. So obviously we've done the placements for this year, so that's where we are now. Where we are now is that we're looking at third year placements starting from September this year, and then fourth year from the year after, because that's where we are in our rollout. With regards to who's coming out of placement at the same time, we have tried to sort it so no 2 years are out at the same time. So we've tried to plan it. And also, for those of you that aren't familiar with the University of Hertfordshire, we also have an OSPAP programme, so the Overseas Pharmacist Assessment Programme. So we have 50 students on that this year, 60 next year, that we also send out for placements. And so we're trying to make sure that they're not at the same time as well. What's really odd is that the OSPAP is still on the old standards. So they're on the old standards and they're not considered as clinical tariff at the minute, because the clinical tariff is only for MPharm students. But if they want to have the 2025 graduates to be on the new foundation year, that means that they're going to have to we're going to have to accredit the OSPAP during the next academic year, and we don't have any standards for that yet. So that will be good fun as well. But there will be an expectation that they will probably be going on to this new. How we're going to fit 13 weeks of placement into a 2-semester programme is beyond it. But that's kind of where we are with regards to that. So normally what happens is that sort of we don't tend to send our placements out until a little bit later. So after the first few weeks of term, so sort of October, November would be the first set of placements coming out. That's kind of where we are with that. So how long with a placement if you know you're getting students? Again, this is down to our administrative team. Obviously, we have to know how many people are in the year before we do that. So we have to work out how many students have progressed. So we can't do that until that point. The idea will be that because we're pairing people up for longer term now, we should be able to do the arrangements much earlier in the year than we have been able to do before. So that's something that we are working on, because we know that we've not always been best and it's sometimes been a bit last minute. You might just have to bear with us because we're running 2 sets of programmes at the minute. It's just a little bit confusing for us at the minute to try and sort out where we're going with that. How can we move forward with this to help support the integration between sectors and to help support portfolio working? I think that's a great comment, because we've discussed things as separate today, but I'm hoping that the work that we do at the university will help for people to see the portfolio, that whilst you're kind of putting your bit in for there, that we're kind of doing the work behind making sure that it's not in silos, and we're working quite strongly together with the ICS. But I think it's important that we can try and work together just to make sure that we're looking at that and that we're encouraging that. There's so many people who are walking into that at the moment. Training pharmacists in order to be a better experience. I'm sorry, I don't know what else you need to know. Training pharmacists in order to be.
I wonder if that's training the pharmacists who's going to be providing the placement.
Oh, I see. Yeah, thank you. maybe that's it. Yeah. So I mean, very clearly we need to put some training on, and that's sort of our next steps, if you like. Where I can use this as a bit of a plug. We're using our money that we've got from HEE as well as doing we're using it three-pronged portfolio, buying some electronic equipment for people who are digital, who have digital poverty, but we're also going to be putting on training and train the trainer, and the idea of we're starting to put together videos of what makes a good scenario and a bad scenario and competent or not competent. So that's the sort of thing that we're trying to do at the minute. So we're starting to think about that. And that will include the detail of what the placement requirements are and the responsibilities of doing things. So that should come from us. How we get to more information on what is covered so you can translate it. Again, that's something that we're hoping to include within that. I think that in the past, we've been quite guilty of the placements just being an add-on. So we teach them stuff at the university, then they come out, and there's not really been that integration there. And certainly in the new curriculum, that's something that we're very keen on, that we have to work in partnership because we haven't got time to cover everything at the university now. So I think that's really important. How we standardise training for the teams providing the placements, that's hopefully what we're doing with the training, but I think that that's really important as well. If we wanted to say yes, is that this year or next year? So it will be starting from September. We need to finalise the endpoint assessment so we know we can facilitate these in practice. I think that that's a really key point. I think realistically, because it's a portfolio and it's against the same set of learning outcomes, the endpoint assessments really aren't going to come until the fourth year. So I think that that's kind of where we are. Is that what it is? I'm presuming that's what EPA was, the acronym that somebody meant. Sorry, that's what I know through degree apprenticeships. EPA is endpoint assessment, unless anybody meant a different acronym. No, okay. Has anybody put something up that's not up there? Oh, yes. Obviously, if you scroll. Will you be organising a structured plan which could adopt and follow suit? Yes, we have that. Do they have pads to sign off similar to nurses? We've looked at, we use pads quite a lot in our postgraduate programmes. So that's something that we've looked at, whether or not, is that what you meant by pads? Yeah. We use them quite, again, people have different interpretation of the things. So we do a lot of those in our postgraduate programme. We're looking at whether or not they'll be appropriate for fourth years or whether or not they're just too clinically based at the minute. Because obviously, having run them for years within a postgraduate diploma, we know some of the downsides of what's going on as well. A student number per placement provided, that will be depending on you, how many you want to do, and our assessment, which is how many we think you can fit in. So that will be a combination of the two things together. Hopefully that's answered most of those. On the.
You mentioned about 13 weeks. Is that over the 4 years?
Yes, it is.
Each individual student?
Yes, so the student will do 1 week in the first year, 3 weeks in the second year, 3 weeks in the third year, and 6 weeks in the final year. I hope that adds up to 13. 70% of my numeracy. Yeah, if that makes sense. Okay, lovely. So I'm going to go on to the next one, which is there any further support that you need moving forward? So training for us as placement providers, that's certainly something that we're doing now. We know that we're upskilling people. We know what, I don't know what NTOI means. So anyone know what that means?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Oh, thank you. Bless your heart. Right, okay, there we go. The dinosaurs of the group not knowing what it is. Not really. The application process to get the pharmacy registered and what inspections are done. So the application process is that I think it's online. I think we've got an online Microsoft form. So if you go onto our website, which is hearts.ac.uk, Hearts, H-E-R-T-S, as in the area, not hearts. So I think if you go on there, that can start it off. If not, I will make sure that Kathy sends out my email address along with everything else, so you can contact me directly and I can put you in touch with the right person. So the registration, it's basically just this is what we provide, this is different things. We do a quick premises search to make sure that you're not blacklisted by the GPHC. And then we do a visit, which is literally we come out and we just check that everything's okay. So it's an audit, and that has to be done for the university requires us to do an audit for all placement sites. But during that audit, what we will do is discuss the sort of numbers that you're thinking about. And for some people, you know, what sort of years you think would be appropriate, what wouldn't be appropriate. That's what we've done in the past. Placetive notice of placement dates, workbooks to engage tutors. Who can be a tutor? Does it need to be a pharmacist? It does need to be a pharmacist, but that's the person signing off. But actually we talked in the previous group about how we could utilise the multidisciplinary team, how we can use technicians and how we can use different members of our workforce. And I think that that's really important. I know that when I was a pre-reg tutor, I used to allow my ACT was in charge of my new pre-reg for the first 3 or 4 weeks. Because I'd say to them, create the pharmacist you want. You're always moaning about the pharmacists that come in here. Create the pharmacist you want. This is your opportunity to create who you want. And I think that that's there. So the sign-off will need to be by a pharmacist. But actually, it's not quite the same as the GPHC. That person doesn't have to be there, stood by their side the entire time. And I think when we were talking about barriers and enablers, that actually came up as a solution from a number of groups, and I think that that's really important, so we can do that there. Training for supervisors and forms for management, I think we've talked about the forms. Does anybody need to know anything else about that? Plenty of notice of training dates, yes, I would agree with you, I think that that's really important. We try to avoid real obvious times as well, so we don't send people out, we try not to use the last few weeks of December. We don't send people out over Easter. Times when people will be shut, that's it. We also have the constraints of the university timetable as well that we have to remember. So we do sort of September to realistically May, that's when our final exams are, so the summer period is out as well, which we know is probably best for you guys as well. Oh, that's nice. Let us know when we're ready to support. To understand what we need to do to site ready to be accredited. So hopefully to do that and to see copies of the portfolios. The other thing that actually came out of the pilot that I don't think I really spoke about earlier is we talked quite a lot, particularly for the third and fourth year when we're starting to get more clinical, is the idea of having a site-specific portfolio. So the portfolio would not be the same, for example, at the mental health trust that it would be at an acute trust. So actually the tasks become specific. And that way we felt that actually there was an ownership as well, where we could convert, change the information at the beginning, so it was trust specific, perhaps with regards to uniform policies or anything like that. So that was something else that we looked at and we've been working with our pilot sites to do, and that's something that I think would be quite important, because then that ownership is there, and it's not just I've got a general portfolio that I'm going out with. But there's a difference, I should be clear, there's a difference between a workbook, which is what they would come out and do, which might have some tasks in it for them, and then their portfolio, which is their general portfolio that they're keeping a log of evidence that they will be able to take with them forever. That's there. So what you need to be able to help students achieve, and I think it's important to recognise that there's a difference as well between perhaps the tasks, which are we've done a CD register or we've done something else. The expectation is that the majority of the learning outcomes will get signed off in the fourth year. Because even if somebody is professional in the first year, that might not be that they have demonstrated all of the attributes of a pharmacist. What we don't want is to sign them off. Yes, this person has the complete attributes of a pharmacist in the first year, and then in the second year then turn up and thump somebody in the face. Or start, maybe less extreme, but start to be late, start to be rude, etc., because they have been signed off. So I think we need to be there. I'm just trying to scroll down. I don't think there's any more of 9 answers. I've got 9 up there. That's great. So I think that's kind of really important that I need to take away is about the planning, about making sure that we're getting there, and then sort of watching this space ready for the training that everybody would be ready to need. But we can't do this by ourselves. It's not possible.